The snow was falling recently. The air was icy cold, and I had just decided to take a leap. After everything that happened to me in the past few years, losing my job, losing my family, and a life that felt like it had fallen apart, I needed a change, so I moved to a small town in upstate New York, known for its quiet streets and rolling hills. Cold Creek Road was a place I had never heard of before. But when I found an old house on the outskirts of the town, something about it called to me. The landlord, a man named Mr. Jensen, was quiet, almost too quiet. He handed me the keys without much of a conversation. The house had been on the market for years, he told me, but no one had stayed long. I thought it was just the market, or maybe the isolation of the place that kept people away. But Mr. Jensen seemed anxious when he handed me the keys. His eyes darted as if he was afraid of something. He said one thing that stuck with me though. It's just a house, don't let it get to you. I didn't think much of it. I was too focused on the idea of peace, of starting over. The house, despite its age, was perfect. A beautiful two-story with creaky wooden floors, high ceilings, and windows that lived in the soft glow of the moonlight. The house sat at the edge of a dense forest, and from the back porch I could see the towering trees stretching for miles. But that first night it felt wrong. I spent my first evening unpacking, setting my new space. The first few hours were peaceful, just the soft rustling of the wind outside and the occasional creak of the house settling. The fireplace flickered as I made myself dinner, and I relaxed, finally able to feel the weight of the world lifting off my shoulders. I had cleaned up and went to bed early, ready to start fresh the next. But as I lay there, wrapped in blankets, the air in the room began to grow colder. Sharper, I shivered as a strange silence filled the house. The only sound was the occasional whisper of the wind against the windows, and then I heard it. Three knocks, tap, tap, tap. The sound echoed through the room, so loud it made the walls shake. I froze, starting at the my heart thumping in my chest. The knocks weren't just random sounds. They were deliberate, timed in sets of three. It came from the walls, as if someone or something was tapping from inside. I lay there for what felt like hours, unable to move. The knocks continued, tap, 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 and then nothing, just silence. I convinced myself it was just the house settling, maybe a branch tapping against the wall in the wind. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. The next morning, I decided to brush it off. It was an old house. After all, old houses have creaks and groans. But later that night, the knocks returned, just as rhythmic, just as precise. Tap, tap, tap. This time, they came from the ceiling, and I could hear the faint sound of something scratching, as if something was trying to make its way through. I quickly turned on the light, but the house was as still as before.
The following day, I called Mr. Jensen. I didn't want to sound crazy, but I needed answers. I asked if anyone had ever had issues with the house. He paused for a moment before answering. It's just an old house. It's nothing to be afraid of. But there was something in his voice, a tremor, a hint of fear that he didn't try to hide. I pressed further, asking if the house had any history, anything that might explain the strange noises. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "It's been here for years. But sometimes old houses have memories." He hung up abruptly after that. The conversation left me feeling uneasy. That night, I lay awake, listening. The knocking came again. But this time, something was different. It wasn't just a knock. It sounded like scratching, like something was scraping against the walls, trying to get through. I jumped out of bed, grabbed a flashlight, and went to the attic door. It was locked. I didn't know why, but I needed to check. I ran to the basement door, and it was locked too. I pounded on the door, hoping it was just some animal stuck inside the walls. But the noise, the scraping, continued. The air grew colder. I decided I wasn't staying another night. The next morning, I went to Mr. Jensen's house to give him my notice. But when I arrived, he wasn't home. His car was gone, and the house was empty. It looked like he had left in a hurry. I didn't know what to think, but I couldn't stay in the house any longer. I packed my things, ready to leave, but just as I was about to head out the door, I turned back. The house seemed still too. Still, the air was thick with something I couldn't explain. It felt like the house was watching me. I went outside, and when I reached the porch, I stopped. There, on the porch steps, was a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. I bent down to pick it up, and when I unwrapped it, I found a photograph. It was old, faded, and worn. The picture was of a family smiling, happy, standing in front of the house, but their eyes were scratched out. A chill ran through me. I didn't know what to do with the photograph, but I knew one thing: I had to get away from that house. The drive away from Winter Hollow was long and quiet. The further I got from the house, the lighter I felt. I went to a friend's place, far away from the town, and stayed there for a few days. But every night, at 2 a.m., I would wake up. I could hear the knocks again, tapping against the walls of the house that wasn't even there anymore. I couldn't escape. It followed me. The worst part: the whispers didn't stop. Let me out. I don't know what's left in that house, but I do know this: whatever was in there, it didn't want me to leave. The end. Story to asterisk. It was the coldest winter night I could remember. The wind howled through the empty streets of Boston, and the snow was falling thick, covering everything in a blanket of white. I had been working as a night shift receptionist at St. Mary's Hospital, a well-known medical center in the heart of the city. The hospital was old, built in the early 1900s, with long hallways and thick stone walls. It had its share of history, some of which, as I later discovered, was far from ordinary. I was used to the quiet of the night shifts. The hospital eerily empty save for a few doctors and nurses making their rounds. Most of the patients were asleep, and the only sounds were the occasional beep from the machines and the distant shuffle of footsteps echoing down the hall. But that night, something felt different. I was in my small office. The lights dimmed to save energy, staring at the computer screen. I had a pile of paperwork to get through: admission forms, insurance claims, the usual administrative duties. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, but inside the office, the atmosphere was still. The office, located in a secluded part of the hospital's old wing, felt far too quiet. There was no one else nearby, and I began to feel a sense of unease. Around 2 a.m., I heard something. It wasn't the usual hospital sounds of beeping or muffled voices in the distance. It was a soft scratching sound, like something was dragging across the floor. At first, I thought it was just the wind, or maybe the building settling. But the sound grew louder and closer, slowly, steadily. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I got up and walked over to the door, peeking out into the hallway. The lights flickered slightly, casting airy shadows on the walls. The hallway was empty. No nurses, no doctors, no patients, just the cold, sterile silence. I returned to my desk, trying to focus on the work in front of me. But the scratching didn't stop. It continued, closer, louder, more persistent. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was a rodent, or some old part of the building shifting. I'd heard rumors about strange noises in the hospital, but I never paid them much mind. The hospital was old. After all, things creaked and groaned, especially during the winter. But then I heard something else, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. It came from the direction of the hallway, just outside my office door. At first, I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a voice, low and raspy, like someone was speaking from just behind the door. I stood still, my heart pounding. The whisper grew clearer, but still, I couldn't understand it. It was more like a groan, or perhaps someone gasping for breath. I walked to the door again, hesitating before opening it. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty. But I noticed something on the floor, a small, wet trail, like something had been dragged across the floor. It was smeared across the tiles, leading down the hallway toward the emergency room. I looked around nervously. There were no signs of anyone else, no nurses, no patients. The hospital felt completely deserted, even though it shouldn't have been. I knew that the night shift staff should have been nearby. But the building felt far too quiet. I took a deep breath and decided to follow the trail dot as I walked down the hallway. The lights above flickered intermittently, casting shadows that seemed to dance along the walls. The trail led me to a storage room near the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar, and the air coming from inside was cold. Even for a winter night, I pushed the door open. Stepping inside, it was dark, save for the faint light from the hallway. The room was filled with old medical equipment, boxes of expired supplies, disused machines, and crates of forgotten items from past years. But in the center of the room, there was something that caught my attention. A hospital gurney, abandoned, with dark stains on the sheet. At first, I thought it was just old blood. But as I approached, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A handprint. A handprint was smeared on the side of the gurney, as if someone had reached out, their hand pressed against the metal frame. But the handprint wasn't just any ordinary mark. It was smudged, the fingers elongated unnaturally, the palm twisted in a way that didn't seem human. It was almost as if the hand had been pulled or distorted in some way. I stumbled backward, my pulse racing. The room felt oppressive, like the air had thickened. I tried to steady my breath, but the overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. Suddenly, I heard the voice again. Let me out. This time, it was clear. It was coming from inside the walls. I was no longer sure if I was hearing it in my head or if the sound was real, but the voice was unmistakable. It was desperate, pleading, let me out. I backed out of the room, my feet stumbling over the tiles. I ran down the hallway, back to my office. Slamming the door shut behind me, I sat in the chair, my heart pounding in my chest, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But the whispers didn't stop. I called the security desk, but no one answered. I checked my phone, but there was no signal. The building was entirely cut off. I felt trapped, isolated in a place that was supposed to offer care, not terror. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the scratching, I heard the whispers, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. Finally, around 5 o'clock a.m., I heard the sound again. This time, it was coming from the emergency room. The whispers were louder now, mixed with the sound of something dragging across the floor. I had to leave. I ran down the hall, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The lights flickered as I passed the rooms, the darkness swallowing everything around me. When I reached the emergency room door, it swung open on its own. The room was dark, the machine silent, but in the center of the room, I saw something, a figure tall, thin, with a face that was barely visible, hidden in shadow. It was standing in the corner, watching me. I froze, unable to move. My heart pounded in my chest. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, but I could feel its presence, like it was breathing just behind me. And then, in a voice that wasn't audible but echoed in my mind, it spoke. You shouldn't have come here. I turned and ran, not stopping until I reached the front doors. I pushed through, stumbling out into the snow-covered parking lot. I didn't look back. I haven't returned to St. Mary's Hospital since that night. I've heard rumors from some of the staff about strange occurrences, but I don't want to know more. I never learned what happened in that hospital, or who or what was trapped in those walls. But every winter, on the coldest nights, I hear the scratching again, I hear the whispers, and I'll never forget the figure in the emergency room. I shouldn't have come there. The end. Story 3 asterisk. It was the dead of winter. The kind of night where the air is sharp and biting, and the streets of Boston were silent under a thick blanket of snow. I had just started a new job in the city working the night shift as a security officer at a large law firm. The office building was old, towering over the surrounding buildings, with dimly lit hallways and endless rows of cubicles. It was supposed to be temporary, just a way to pay the bills until I figured out my next move. The first few nights were uneventful. The building was mostly empty at night, with only a handful of people working late in their offices. I had to keep an eye on things, monitor the security cameras, and make sure the building stayed locked up tight. It was a quiet, isolated job, but the kind of solitude I needed after everything I'd been through. But one night, that all changed. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I first noticed something strange. The office floor was completely silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights above me. I was sitting at the security desk, watching the surveillance screens. Most of the monitors were just static images of empty hallways, a few rooms where the lights were on, and the occasional person walking by. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. In one of the offices on the 4th floor, I noticed a figure standing by the window. The blinds were pulled halfway down, but I could see the faint outline of a person standing motionless, facing the window. I stared at the screen, thinking it was probably just someone working late. But then I noticed something even more unsettling. The figure wasn't moving at all. I zoomed in on the camera feed, trying to get a better look. The person appeared to be standing in the same spot, staring out the window, completely still. I checked the time again to 4:45 a.m. and wondered why anyone would be standing like that in the middle of the night. I tried calling the office extension for the 4th floor, but there was no answer. I thought about going upstairs to check, but something told me not to. I didn't want to disturb whoever was up there. And besides, it was probably nothing, a late worker, or someone who just happened to be in the office late. I tried to shrug it off, but as I turned my attention back to the monitor, I noticed something terrifying. The figure wasn't just standing still, it was slightly leaning forward. As if it was straining to look outside, I felt a strange chill run down my spine. Something about the way the figure moved, or rather, didn't move, was unsettling. I couldn't look away from the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. I tried calling again, but still, there was no answer. And then, the figure turned. It was subtle at first, but the head moved slowly to face the camera. At first, it seemed like a trick of the light, but then it became unmistakably clear. It was looking directly at me. I froze. The figure's face was hidden in shadows, but I could feel its gaze, its presence. It was as if the eyes were piercing straight through me, though I couldn't see them clearly. For a moment, I thought I was imagining things, but then I heard something that sent my pulse skyrocketing. A soft knock. Not from the door, not from the windows, but from the walls. 3 knocks, sharp and deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. It was faint, but it was there, coming from the other side of the room. I looked round, expecting someone to be playing a prank on me. I checked